darkness and her willingness to survive anything. And when you read about Brett Butler, your daddy's over in Korea right now, fighting our nation's enemy, a fighter plane. He will remind you of Rhett. He has that kind of dash, that kind of flair. And then she would tell me, now Melanie Wilkes, she will remind you of your tacky Aunt Helen. And that mealy-mouthed Aunt Helen will come instantly to mind. But my mother was doing me a favor. My mother was telling me, for the first time, there was a relationship between life and art. Remember, we were in New Bern, North Carolina, and my mother kept this reading up. And it was that year she read the Diary of Anne Frank. And when you're a little boy, I think I was 6 that year, you fall in love with Anne Frank. And she's in that, attic, and she's writing these wonderful notes, and I thought, oh. And what you want as a little boy is to, you fall in love with, you want to be with her in that attic, instead of that loser she was with. And my sister got caught up with this, and the diary continued. And then suddenly, the diary ended. And my mother had not told us a single word of what was going to happen. And then finally it ends, and my sister Carol says, "What's wrong? Where's Anne?" I said, "What happened to the rest of the diary?" And my mother had to tell us about Nazi Germany, about cattle carts, about 6 million Jews dying in concentration camps, being gassed, being burned. So here were these little kids, and my sister said, "They did this to Anne Frank? Didn't they read her diary?" And my mother said something that has astonished me from that day until now. My mother said, "I would like to raise a family that will hide Jews." And she repeated, "I'd like to raise a family that will hide Jews." The next day, my sister, and I still don't know how, she was 4 years old. And my sister Carol Ann takes me next door, and we knock on the door of Mrs. Oranger's house. And Ms. Oranger came to the door, and when she opened the door, my sister said, "We will hide you." And Ms. Oranger looked at us and she goes, "What?" And it was this mother who made me, and this is important, my mother raised me to be a Southern writer, with emphasis on the word Southern. And the only literary advice she ever gave me is never be ashamed of where you come from. Except, of course, from your father's side. And she wanted that badly. And what she put me in touch with is this magical world of story. And the story, still seems conceptually to carry the Southern book. I love to read Sanders. And, Rick's, the story of his mother, I just went absolutely berserk when I read that book. And it's always nice, too, when you read a book and you think, I'm entering the fields of literature. This will make me a better person. When I was reading about the literary event of the century, I think the literary event for all centuries in Alabama is when Harper Lee played with Truman Capote in the Sandbox. Okay. The next book I write, and I'm writing it now, is so I don't have to listen to my wife say, it was 14 years ago. Then he limped out with another novel. But I write the story of my father's change after we read The Great Santini. Because my father, I mean, he was, and I would tell Dad this all the time. When my mother divorced my father, he came to Atlanta. We've never had a conversation. Ever. I loathed him. And I'm ashamed of this very fact, this very moment. I refused to go to his retirement from the Marine Corps when they gave him a parade. But I hated the guy. So he knocks at my door in Atlanta. I didn't know he knew where I lived. And he says, son, you want to go out and get a beer? We'd never been out to get a beer. We sit down at Manuel's Tavern in Atlanta. And my father lays his head down on the table and begins sobbing. I'd never seen my father cry. And I said, Dad, and it was pitiful. I just was gonna. And I said, Dad, do you know what you did wrong now? Do you know where it went wrong with Mom and the kids? And my father goes, yes! I said, well, how do you think it happened? What do you think happened? And he said, I was too good, son. I should have cracked down harder. So I look at him and I say, Nero couldn't have cracked down harder. I mean, what are you talking about? But it began, The Great Santini came out, the novel. And my father hated it. It began, though, his redemption among his children. It even began his redemption with my mother. And my father became very good friends with her ex-husband. And they even got together for weekend trips after my mother died. And I said, Dad, what's wrong with this guy? Is it it's something very bad has happened to this guy. Hey, son, he knows a great man when he sees it. And my father did. What my father hated everything about the book, he went crazy about the movie, The Great Santini. And he said, too bad John Wayne is dead, son. Only he can get my incredible virility across to the American people. Hollywood did me one great favor. I got him to send my father a telegram. And in the telegram it says, Colonel Conroy, we have chosen the actor to play you. And he's going to fly into Atlanta to meet you, to get to know you. His name is Truman Capote. And my father was strapping on his pistol. But when the movie came out in Duvall, and my father thought he was responsible for Robert Duvall's career. He never had a part with meat on his son. He never got a chance to show what he could do before he played me. Well, the 19 Academy Awards were announced that year. My father flies through the door, and he says to me in my apartment in Atlanta, he's flying through the door. He's happier than I've ever seen him. And he says, son, you and I received Academy Award nominations last night.